The nuclear age began with a monopoly by the United States. The United States exploded the first device on June the 16th, 1945 at Alamogordo. And then very shortly afterwards, they exploded a device on August the 6th, 1945 on Hiroshima. And 3 days later, they exploded a device on August the 9th on Nagasaki. The Soviet Union got nuclear weapons very quickly afterwards. In fact, they confounded the experts who had predicted that it would take the Soviet Union much longer to get them. And for a while, we lived in a bipolar world in which only the Soviet Union and the United States had nuclear weapons. Gradually, France, Britain, and China became nuclear powers. So you now had 5 major nuclear powers. Then in the summer of 1974, the Indians exploded a nuclear device so that India became the 6th nuclear power. Meanwhile, we have very, I think, highly documented and credible information that Israel has nuclear weapons. And of course, you know, the Middle East is probably the most geostrategically sensitive place in the world, because you have this accident of geology that it contains the richest resources of oil in the world, in the Persian Gulf, resources which the West require to run the machines of industry, and that it's an area in which 3 fundamental religions. We usually think of the fundamentalists as the Arab, the fundamentalists of Muslim. But the Hebrew fundamentalists are indulging in their own prophecies, and there are American Christian fundamentalists, each of who lay claim spiritually and theologically to that one single territory, each of whom sees that as the consequence of history, as inevitable, sees the second coming of the messiahs, and each has its own messiah and so on. So you can see that it's a center of incredible, explosive capability. And we know that Libya, for example, is not far away from getting nuclear capability. That Iraq was close to getting nuclear capability when the Israelis bombed their reactor. If you turn now to the North American region, both Argentina and Brazil are now known to have all the elements to assemble nuclear weapons. They have plants processing nuclear weapons grade materials. They have secretly purchased a number of the components so that they could put together nuclear weapons, and that would be the first new group in the Western Hemisphere to have nuclear weapons. Pakistan is the closest now to having nuclear weapons. We believe that Pakistan has untested nuclear weapons already. So you have another area of fundamental antagonism, Pakistan-India, in which India has nuclear weapons and Pakistan is close to having nuclear weapons. This is the problem of proliferation, which is so frightening. And I'm surprised even now that third parties, terrorist groups, have not yet acquired nuclear weapons and committed what we call the ultimate terrorist act involving a nuclear weapon. And that could happen at any time. I'm merely surprised that it hasn't happened as yet, because there are a large number of clandestine operations involving the diversion of critical nuclear weapons, critical nuclear materials, West Germany has been particularly guilty in this respect, as it is with chemicals. So it would not be surprising at some point in the future, a scenario where a terrorist group who so far have killed a couple of hundred Marines, taken hostages and so on, will have a nuclear weapon. And they don't really need a nuclear weapon. All they need is to hijack plutonium. And there's a law that, I call it Knelman's law just as a joke, but that in technology, as traffic increases, accidents become inevitable. Now you can think of traffic in the literal sense as automobile traffic. We now know with certainty, the certainty of 100% probability, actuarial certainty, that roughly 5,000 people will be killed in the next 12 months in Canada, and roughly 50,000 people will be killed in the next 12 months in the United States from automobiles. Automobiles have killed more people in the history of their existence than all the wars America has ever fought. And yet we can't find the means to control this technology. The same is true as tankers. The accident of the Valdez, the Exxon supertanker was inevitable. It wasn't really an accident. Once you reach a certain density of traffic, whether it's oil tankers or automobiles or weapons or the movement of plutonium, and we're moving into a plutonium economy where plutonium will be transshipped all over the world, then it becomes inevitable and 100% probable there will be diversions, and we will have this horrible case of somebody having a clandestine weapon involved in a terrorist act, which could trigger a nuclear war. Now you'd think that a country like Canada, who now is the largest exporter of uranium in the world, and Saskatchewan, northern Saskatchewan, is the single largest supplier of uranium in the world. The largest resources in the world are there. The largest operating mine in the world, the Key Lake mine, is in Saskatchewan. The new Cigar Lake mine, I think I mentioned it, is called a geological elephant. It is so huge, and it's all contained in a relatively small volume. It's one great big cubic mile of an ore body containing uranium in a proportion that's 70 times as rich as any other mine in the world, some 300 million pounds there. We could, if Canada wanted, it could do the following. It could say, you can buy uranium from us. Yes, we won't withhold the sale of uranium. But we must have guaranteed inspections of all the processing of that uranium so that none of our uranium is diverted from civil to military use. And secondly, that all the residues that are left over from what they call the enriching process must be returned, so that you can't use that portion. They call the depleted uranium. You can't use that in the manufacture of weapons. And we don't do that. That's the minimum.